Expecting my first child, I can't help but worry about what it will be like for her to grow up in a world where it's right against left, liberal against progressive, black against white, etc., ad nauseum. Everyone is forced to choose a side, and that becomes more important than the truth. What's up, everyone? On the heels of the Pfizer video that I made, I am back with another video. We are going to talk about the Twitter files. There is a lot going on. I'm not going to rehash all of it here. I would say as homework, I would recommend you actually try to dig for information about this story and realize just how much the mainstream media is not covering this. And I've got a message to my fellow Americans, to you out there as individuals, about just how ridiculous and pervasive this problem with mainstream media is and what we as individuals can do about it. So if you'll bear with me, here we go. At a high level, these Twitter files reveal a lot about what has happened under previous leadership that is very disturbing. And part of the problem here, I fear, is that it leaves a lot of the mainstream media that use Twitter to justify their stories for a very long time will find themselves exposed as a result of this, and therefore do not want to cover it or give it the attention that it truly and rightly deserves. If you want to learn more, sources of ground truth, Matt Taibbi, Glenn Greenwald, I would highly recommend. Matt was actually brought in by Elon to do independent reporting of what actually went on at Twitter prior to Elon's arrival. And my understanding is that he has carte blanche to look at everything that matters and do unbiased reporting and give unbiased opinions so long as he reveals them through the Twitter platform. To date, he has uncovered the degree to which the previous Democratic administration has actively censored real American voices that simply dissented with their own worldview. And as time has gone on, more recently, has uncovered how they also silenced voices under the guise of Russian propaganda, Russian bots, and it was all made up. What is being referred to as the Hamilton 68 Twitter file, which is basically a government organization flagging Twitter users as Russian bots, and then mainstream media using this list to ultimately invalidate anything that was said. The reality that has come to pass is that the majority of these accounts are actually real people, in many cases real US citizens that were simply targeted for having an opinion that went against those who were doing the censoring. For those of you who care about living in a free and civil society, I hope you can understand the magnitude of the implications of this reporting and why it is honestly shocking, although not necessarily surprising, to see that mainstream media is not covering this at all and is entirely complicit in what took place prior. To be clear about some explicit things that happened, the FBI, the Department of Homeland Security, other government agencies had direct access to Twitter employees to censor dissident voices. They would provide list of names, and Twitter employees would handle these requests with the nonchalance of the Pfizer employee, Jordan Tristan Walker. To hear Matt Taibbi talk about this, it's almost like a pot boiling over time. The culture becomes incestuous. Those that might initially raise dissent get quelled. Those that might initially be skeptical do it enough, and eventually it just becomes part of the routine. And that's why it's so interesting to see the fervor with which everyone was up in arms about Elon taking over Twitter, the front of that being Twitter employees themselves, and now on the back end, it's almost like in Elon overpaying for Twitter, he has given the world insight that we never would have gotten. And if you actually understand what took place, you would understand just how significant of a story this is and how important it is that this has actually come to light. When I made the video on Pfizer, Project Veritas, and Jordan Tristan Walker, I wasn't sure of the reception it would receive. And in the back of my mind, there has been something that has gnawed at me. And when that happens, I find it best just to vocalize it. It's one thing when you're only worried about yourself and you know better, so you ignore things like issues with biased media, or indulge in ignorance because the world has gone too mad for you to handle. I'm not sure if others who have gone through this generally feel the same way, but I have to imagine many do, because it just seems so instinctual. Expecting my first child, I can't help but worry about what it will be like for her to grow up in a world where it's right against left, liberal against progressive, black against white, etc., ad nauseum. Everyone is forced to choose a side, and that becomes more important than the truth. I'm going to frame this next bit with a terrible dad joke. A father asks his two kids in college, "Where do you get your news?" Expecting to hear CNN or Fox, they both replied in unison, "Twitter." And as I said in the Pfizer video, this is a sad sign of the times. And that's why, if you've heard of the Twitter files, you owe it to yourself to really dig deeper. Because this is a world in which mainstream media is, at best, papering over this issue as nothing to see, and at worst, outright ignoring it. These Twitter files are very interesting. One side, the left to be clear, high and mighty, claim the other was Russian propaganda without fact-checking or evidence. You could argue they did it on purpose. At a minimum, they like what they heard enough as to not dig any deeper. And this is where it gets weird and hard. How do those in control of the media police this information age? Elon, upon buying Twitter, said freedom of speech is not freedom of reach. In principle, I agree. But part of the problem here is freedom of reach in today's society is almost functionally equivalent. And the only thing that should stop this, in my opinion, is misleading propaganda generated with malicious intent. But who should be the judge? A wolf in sheep's clothing that I did not see coming, being revealed in these Twitter files, the side in control of one of the biggest sources of information in our time, where politicians go first and where all media turns during elections for their sound bites, Twitter, was actually actively being controlled and censored by left-leaning actors under entirely false pretense, quelling the thought process of a collective half of the nation. Do you know what it feels like to try to speak the truth and not be heard? Can you imagine what that might make you do? I do not condone in any way, shape, or form what happened to the Capitol on January 6th. But in the wake of what happened, we collectively, as Americans, owe it to ourselves to ask, why? And with evidence like this coming to light, I think everyone in America owes it to themselves, their children, and their fellow countrymen to understand that trying to feel better or comfortable about their lives by isolating in an echo chamber and invalidating and suppressing anything and everything that might remotely be offensive to your thoughts is exactly how we collectively, as a society, will fall apart. To those who have watched my video and commented in this fashion, that this is America and that truth matters, thank you. You give me hope. Hope that the world my daughter grows up in won't actually be as messed up as I fear it might. So what can you as an individual do? Fight the urge to be complacent, to be complicit. Seek truth. Stand up for what's right, not just what you believe or want to believe. At the very core, the highest level, I think the majority of us all want the same thing: to live in a civil society, to be able to easily access truth. But those things require open discussion and debate that necessitates not turning off half your brain every time something doesn't fit your worldview. I myself have been guilty of this at times, and I suspect if we all were to look in a mirror and try to be honest with ourselves, we all have at some point. We live in a brave new world, and it's hard not to have gotten caught in it. But the first step to change starts with personal acknowledgement and intent. Just like in AA, where the first step asks people to take an honest look at their lives and tell the truth, we need more people to understand mainstream media is no longer truth-seeking, but rather worldview reinforcing. And the idea of fake news or propaganda or things marked with an asterisk may actually have real merit. And you shouldn't be afraid or ashamed to dig. When you try, like myself, you'll quickly come to the realization that the current structure of mainstream media makes accessing certain truths very difficult, if not impossible. And that is if you are intentional about it. For those who don't even try or are unaware, they don't stand a chance. So if you've made it this far, fight the fight, because we, the people, have become the front line. That's all I've got. Thanks for watching. I appreciate you, and I will see you at the next one soon.